Now, when we talk about human capital supply chain, we're talking about this flow of people. And Libby hit on it earlier, too, saying, you know, it's a whole different type of workforce out there now. They don't intend to stay. You have to accept the fact they're going to be coming in and going out. And in some cases, they're going to come in and they're going to leave. A couple years later, they're going to come back and they're going to leave again. And maybe later on in their career, they come back and they leave again. We're not used to that. We're not used to a continual flow of talent through the organization. We think finitely. We think, you know, once we get them in the door and they're hired and they're with their organization, then we kind of move on. Because we've got all these other recs we've got to fill. But again, we have to think about it. It's a flow. It's a supply chain. So what we have to do is think about all those different pieces of the supply chain, from the temporary worker through their staffing supplier, and in many cases now, procurement's part of the equation now too. It's not just an HR function. And part of that is because we kind of let procurement get in the middle of it. You know? Procurement, their benefit is that they're very system-oriented. They're very methodical in how they go through things. So what's happened now is contingent that procurement office is kind of in the middle of things now. So we have to learn to get along with them. We may not like them because we think, you know, they're left brain, we're right brain, I mean, we're just different personalities. But in order for your corporation to get ready and to move forward and to rebuild your business, you have to get in tight with that procurement office. Now, HR, we're great at the onboarding process and making sure everybody's feeling comfortable, and then moving on to the hiring interview. Again, when you come back and make the analogy back to manufacturing, the supply chain model holds up. Because in manufacturing, you had your part supplier, your sub-assemblies, procurement was procuring all those different sub-assemblies and materials, manufacturing assembled, and then you have quality. So again, explain to your leadership why this is important, why this is something you need to go and work on. Now, I'm not going to go through all the boxes on here, but the whole point of what HR is working on, what manufacturing distribution, what sales is working on, again, the systems we need to integrate have a lot to do with payroll, benefits, recruitment, performance, all those different aspects. One of the examples of processes we're trying to optimize is the candidate to hire process. Financial impact, we have to optimize the human capital spend. Now, what I mean by this is that your responsibility is to look at, within your corporation, how much money is it spending on all that human capital. Now, typically in most corporations, the corporation has a very good idea on knowing what they spend on full-time headcount. All the charts are there. We do a pretty good job on understanding what our part-time spend is. And we, in most cases, within the financial systems, they're kind of added together. But when we move into other areas like, what do we spend on temporaries? What do we spend on 1099 contractors? What do we spend on consultants? One thing I got to give consultants for, they have figured out how to bury their costs throughout the organization. And you don't know. The corporation doesn't know how much they spend on consulting talent. It's buried in all those operating budgets. And in many cases, it's intentional. Because your operating managers don't want their bosses to know how much they're having to spend on those management consultants. But our job as human capital professionals is to help start to figure that out. Again, when we talk about the business impact, it's coming back to my premise when we started this, is how do we eliminate extreme layoffs? It's our job. If those extreme layoffs are happening, it's our job to try to help smooth that out. So we don't have the highs that have to come down to such terrible lows. And to be honest with you, when we wrote the book on human capital supply chain, that's the reason why we wrote it. We started writing it in the first quarter of 2009. It was terrible. Corporations that were announcing layoffs of tens of thousands of people. And we thought about it within our organization. We thought, there's got to be a different way to do this. Manufacturers figured it out. Distribution's figured it out. It's time for us to kind of figure it out. And in reality, it's going to take time. And we talked about each of those different groups. It took each one of them a decade from the point they started with ERP and manufacturing to the point it was widely used. So this is a journey. This is a 10-year journey that all of us are going to have to work through. What we're trying to do from our point of view with the book is just give you a jump start, to get the ideas flowing, so that you can go and think about how it affects it within your organization. Now, when we talk about how do we prevent this from happening again, how do we get ready for the ramp up of the headcounts that will take place? One of the first things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to sit down with your CFO and your financial team. You may not want to do it, but you have to. It's the first step. Because what you have to do is you have to work with them to figure out what is your whole spend on human capital. You have to figure that out. You have to figure out how to pull it out of these financial systems and financial reports that don't report it. And my point is that HR should start developing those reports. Again, they have to base on the financials, but it's your responsibility to go and figure that out, because that's the first step for you to get credibility within the corporation. Is to go to your executives and say, look, we've worked with everybody, here's how much we're spending every year on all these different categories of human capital. Now you start to get credibility. Now people start to listen and say, okay, boy, I never realized we were spending that much. I knew how much we were spending on the full-time headcount, but I didn't realize there were all these other categories of human capital we were spending money on. So that's the first step. The other step is looking at human capital and looking at those 5 different pieces. The full-time, the part-time, the temps, the contractors, the consultants. And there's other categories too. If you're using a PEO, you've got people over in the PEO. That money's still flowing back through. If you've worked through some business outsourcing arrangements, maybe in your company they've outsourced the help desk, maybe they've outsourced HR, you've got to pull that money back in, because it all relates back to human capital. Those are going to be pushed to keep looking for ways to optimize spending within the organization. So you have to make a choice. You start down this road, you start to pull the data together, you start to look at how to optimize that flow of all talent categories for your organization, or you let the CFO do it. I'd rather people in this room do it, because then you have control over that process. You're the one that brought the initiative to the board. And then maybe that goes a long way towards what we talked about in the beginning, is how do we get more HR professionals on the board of directors, so you can have more of a direct impact on the decisions that are being made.